Hi, my name is AJ O'Neill. I'm in Cranberry, Pennsylvania. This is ONeil's Quality Devons. With my cattle, we also have a business storefront that's ONeil's Quality Foods. I'm a member of Red Devon USA, and as well as a board member of Red Devon USA. I primarily raise for beef production. I started raising beef in 2012. I started with some dairy animals, and I had them in a confinement and feeding, a no roughage ration. And actually kind of went completely the other way to where I'm doing all grass fed. And so somewhere around 2015, 16, I transitioned over to purebred herd with the idea that I like the Devons. I like the fine bone structure. I'll even see when I do crossbred Devons that I'm getting heavier weights, and my yield and my cutouts aren't quite as well as they are with the purebreds. I actually had a discussion with another guy who he raises about 50 animals for production every year, and he said that he finds that the purebred Devons, the meat quality is better than it is whenever he has the crossbreds. So I'm mainly using them for beef, but I'm picking out, my best ones, and I'm going to keep them for myself. Or, if I have people that are interested in them, I'll sell them as seed stock. But I'm going to I try to keep, weighing my calves at birth. I'm getting weaning weights. I'm trying to keep all the data and collect the data so I can evaluate my best animals. And I'll sell seed stock. I have in the past, and I still will. But mainly I call heavily for beef production and horns, and a lot of times most of the buyers around here aren't real interested in having horned animals, especially if you just have one or two in a group that doesn't have horns. They tend to use them a lot more. So anything with horns that's going to go into meat production for me, and I'm going to keep the cattle that are pulled and doing well with production. So what's interesting is, even though this time of year where grass isn't growing anymore, this is our stockpiled forage that we have. I set this aside for the last 2 months to make sure I had good feed. I got second crop hay, some of the best I could source in the area, and you're watching all these cows move away from that second crop hay to do what they do best, and that's graze this grass. So that kind of goes to tell you our stored feeds, no matter how good equipment we have and how well we can make it, the cows still prefer nice green grass. I got a couple different water setups. I have a couple that with heaters on them that are in the barn. If I'm going to graze around there, or have some, I'll do bale grazing outside the barn. But I'm saving that kind of until colder temperatures, probably in February. Later January, February. Right now I have the frost-free hydrants, and I just have to fill their water troughs every day to keep up with it. And so it's more time consuming. I'd rather animals drink as they want, from automatic waters. But for this, they say this keeps me more mobile, and I can keep grazing around the farm until I run out of forage, and then we'll go on to do a little bit more of keeping them with options to go inside whenever it gets colder, just to take care of our animal and have a little better animal husbandry. But they always have opportunity to go outside, get some sun on them, pick at the grass a little bit, and do their grazing outside. This cow here she has 25% milking Devon in her. You can see she's a little bit finer, not quite the body condition of a couple of the other ones, but she always raises a fantastic calf. Has great milk quality and lots of milk production. I actually see her sometimes with a couple calves on her, taking care of some of the other ones. This one here is ONeil Malibu. We had her halter broke for the fair. She's a daughter of one of Lakota's kings, and it's called Lakota King. And he had 50% dairy, so she's got 25% dairy in her, and always raising real beefy, nice calf at side. So she's super gentle since we've had her out at the fair, and she's been halter broke and was led. She's a good animal. I'm just going to put her into our beef program, but that gives you a little idea of what we're doing with our selection. She is ready to go in the beef program. A couple of things I'll point out here, she'll let me. You can see she's got heavy fat deposits around the tail. You can see she's nice and filled in. You'll start to see that brisket, rather than it being so curved up, you'll see that fat's really laying down in there. I had one guy say whenever they look like they have a right angle on their brisket, that's when you know it's nice and fat and filled in, and you know she's ready for the butcher program. She's nice and straight. I sure wish I could have kept her into my herd. This is ONeil's Quality Foods. Thank you guys for coming. We established this in 1989, and Mom and Dad have been moving it ever since. It's a business that keeps evolving. It originally started right here where the ramp starts to go up. This was the original building, and we've built on 3 times since. So it just keeps evolving. It started as a produce stand, and now I'd say our meat sales is probably at least 70% of the businesses are just the meat sales itself, and then the value-added products that come with it.
But you know, it's a little bit of everything, and that's one of those things that I kind of miss that mom and pop feel, but a little bit of everything. Stores used to be that, and I noticed everybody knows you. Everybody says hi.
Oh,
you say hi to everybody.
Yeah.
You probably know their kids or whatever
Yeah.
it happens to be, and it's kind of a family thing. It is truly a family thing because your mom's over here behind the register, and your dad was carrying a turkey when we met him.
Yep, that's true. Yeah, and then I got 2 other sisters, 2 older sisters. One, she's a teacher at school, but then you'll see her here different times during the week after school. She'll come in and work a couple hours after week, and then she'll have her daughter in here. She's 8 years old now, and she'll be running the cash register with her mom looking over her shoulder, teaching her. And then my oldest sister, she's moved away, but anytime she's back in town, she hops right in and helps with caterings and several events. So.
Have you always done this, or is this something you said in high school? I want to have my hands on cold meat.
Yeah, no, it was just something that evolved. Honestly, it was when I went to school. I went to school for engineering, and then I had I had health issues, and I just always ended up back here. Felt natural. I worked at a drafting department for a little while, but then I'd still work here on the weekends. And the computer wasn't for me. The way I grew up with this, and that's what was comfortable for me. So I ended up back here, and like I say, after college, I just kind of took ownership of it, and then I started raising cattle on my own. That was kind of the offshoot of my parents, because I was kind of always under my parents' umbrella, and then this was kind of the offshoot of mine. I started my own business with the cattle to complement our business here, and then it just keeps evolving as well. Got to meet great people like Jeremy Ng did some consulting for me, and then I started that's how I got my foot in with Red Devons and following some of the work. So, and now I'm on the board of directors for 6 years. And
yes, you are. And your name is actually fairly commonly mentioned,
yeah.
so you're an active
Yeah.
board member. You're not
Yeah.
just one of those guys that sits in the bench,
Yeah.
right? Or
Yeah, I'm
that
pretty
tries to
active.
have a hanging piece of Devon beef for us to film
Yeah.
when people come through and
Right.
say, hey, you got a side of beef? Yeah, I might have one of those.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, but that family concept seems to stick. So do you run all the day-to-day logistics in here, or do you go back there in that room and do cuts all day, or a little of both?
Yeah, it's more and more it's administrative work, and you know, it's a balance. It depends on the time of year, but yeah, I find myself doing a lot more ordering and logistics, and that probably my time is probably split almost 50-50. I make all the products. That's just something that my dad had his original way of doing it, and I keep going to classes at Penn State and learning more and more about how to make the products in the more technical side. So it keeps evolving. So I like to, anytime we're making products, I have my hand in that all the time.
That name keeps coming up, Penn State, and Pennsylvania's gorgeous, gorgeous. They're a big farming country, but boy, there's a lot of technological advances here, and ag is huge in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I have great relationships with several of those guys from Penn State. Their ag department is huge, and they're trying to push it. And from the meat side of that, we have every year they hold a conference for all the meat processors in Pennsylvania. Plus, it goes into New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, Ohio. It's really expanded, but it's called the Pennsylvania Association of Meat Processors. And they'll bring us down there, and we'll do several sessions on, you know, here's the best way to make jerky. Here's several methods of how to do it. Here's cooking methods. Like, they pretty much are giving you as much value as you can to take back to your farm or take back to your stores.
So, but that's a very interesting thing, because you would think that there are certain things where technological advances don't, I mean, there might be a different knife or a different machine or whatnot, but really our production systems have changed, and our animals in some ways are changing, and I would assume that maybe as consumer tastes change and nutritional profiles are more important, and you know, then there's a little more art and science to that you know, it's not just a steak anymore. You might want different cuts. It might be raised differently. I mean, we went on the goat tour, and the first time I tasted goat, I thought it was horrible, and then the second, it was wonderful. But it was all in how you cooked it, what you did with it, and that, you know, that might be a very different thing to different people. So I can see how Penn State would say, no, there's some differences in how animals were before, how we butchered them, and how we need to do it now based on I mean, would that be the case?
Yeah, that is true. And then they also help you to keep up with USDA regulations. I mean, in today's day and age, there's constant over-regulation.
Bane of everybody's existence, right? So it's a blessing, but
so they're constantly keeping us up with, like, here's the latest that we're required to do. Here's different cooking methods, because now, like, the jerky, they changed. You know, if you're going to label it jerky, it has to meet these certain guidelines and protocols and cooking processes. So they really kind of help to pull you through, and they're working with our state inspection, and you know, so it's all working together. I mean, for a long time, it's like the inspection has been kind of like they butted heads with the processors and stuff, and now we're finally getting that community. My state inspector comes in here, knows me by name. You know, we email, talk. If I have questions, he's always open to it. So he's not out here trying to figure out what I'm doing wrong and how to, you know, punish me for it. He's come alongside you and, like, here's how we can work together and make a better product for your community.
Yeah, and when you think about it, there's all these things in life. You might not want money to go into the tax code, even though I'm one of the people that says, you know what, make it easier and cheaper, because I want everything to run, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of how you do it. The USDA is responsible for something that everybody can take advantage of at least 3 times a day, right?
Yeah.
And when you look at salmonella outbreaks, and you look at safety issues, and you look at just the basic ability to look on a label and say, hey, oh yeah, that's how much protein is in that. Yeah, that's how much fat, because you're feeding your family on it. So you can have a profound impact on it. But from the producer, I mean, from the producer side, you know, if you're raising beef and you have to get your cattle to Slaughterhouse, some of this can be really onerous to try and deal with the regulations. So you deal with not just the beef raising side and the slaughterhouse end of things, but then the labeling and packaging side.
Yeah, all the other processing.
So you get 4 or 5 times the USDA
yeah, right.
contact, right?
Yeah, so I have to have good relationship with them because I get, and it helps me to understand what they want in the process, and so then I know how to do it correct.
Yeah, one of the things that we hear a lot is that when you do raise beef, it's very difficult to get a slaughterhouse slot. Is that the same here in Pennsylvania? Are you allowed mobile slaughter? How does that work?
Yeah, so it is. It can be difficult to get into slaughter times, and it's funny because I see the farmer side, and they're always, complaining, well, I can't get these slaughter dates, but in our area, we're fortunate enough there is quite a few processors and slaughterhouses around. Only if you go 50 miles either way on either side of me, you'll get there's at least 3 of them that are federally inspected slaughter facilities. So I mean, this Western PA hub has a whole bunch of like small mom and pop shops like us and slaughterhouses. But the farmers, I go back and I've kind of put the onus back on the farmers because every farmer wants to like raise them through the year and then they want to slaughter them in the fall. So the bottleneck is always in the fall, and and it's like, well, why don't we kind of plan ahead a little bit for it instead of and then deer season, and most processors around here are making more money on processing deer than they are beef. So once December hits, they shut off their beef slaughter, a lot of them, and then just go for the deer. And so I mean, so farmers, they want to see more processors, and they keep saying they want to see more state USDA inspected slaughterhouses. But for one, I say if you could just give more employees to those slaughterhouses, they could run at a higher production.
You
Instead
better
of
believe it.
everyone wants to open up a new shop, and we'll only have like 4 or 5 employees like us. It's like, if you got some skilled people at one shop, you could get 4 times the production out of the place. So I kind of push back a little bit on that, and as well as people just not wanting to plan ahead. I mean, they want to call it up and be like, hey, my animal's ready. Well, there's not too many things in life that you just do it on a whim. So why would the meat processing be any different?
Yeah, but you're a logistics guy. I mean, I don't know if that engineering background helps you to view things that way, but this is a major undertaking. So actually, show me around if you would.
I'll show you around. This is our deli we do here, and all of our lunch meats are homemade. We've actually won several awards through, I told you about Penn State. And these are some of the awards that we've won. We go down there. They do a friendly competition where you pay money. They have a judge that judges each class. There's about 26 different classes. This was this year's, our large diameter lunch meat we won with this year, which would have been like our premium bologna, which is our lean bologna, jumbo bologna we make.
I'm just going to stop you and say, this is a first for me. I wouldn't even begin to know what large diameter luncheon meat ready to eat would be prior to this. I know what a Holstein is, but that's the first time I've heard that phrase. And it's something that is super important to everybody, because when you find a good deli, boy, you stick with it, right?
Yep.
So these are awards that might be commonly given in any state, or that's just Penn State's little tongue-in-cheek thing, or?
There's one that they do in the Midwestern states, where it's the American Association of Meat Processors.
Yep.
So those are the only 2 that I know of in the United States that does this.
And you've got all of these.
Yep, we've got several awards.
One of Class 4 bacon. Now that sounds pretty good to me. Yeah.
Another one of our lunch meats that we did. This was a cured and fermented lunch meat that we won with. That would have been our Lebanon bologna that we make. So it actually, I put a live culture. It's similar to making wine, where I'll put a live culture into the meat, and you add enough sugar, and then you put in a fermentation process, which you have to control your humidity and temperature.
Yeah.
As the product continues to ferment, it's about like 7-8 hour process. It'll drop the pH of the meat. Once you get the pH of the meat low enough to where USDA says it's safe, then you're going to go ahead and finish cooking it, ramp up the product, finish cooking the product, so you're killing the culture now. So then that makes it shelf stable, and as long as you dry it long enough that you get the water activity out of it, and your water activity is in the safe zone, then it's a fermented culture, and it could be a shelf stable product.
That's
a
fairly complex thing, but the purpose behind a lot of this before, at least, taking and having salted meats or bacon was to make the life of the product last, right? So it used to be sugar and salt that were the two big preservatives. Is that right?
Yep.
And then you would dry or season or whatever. But now bacon's a food group, right? It's not just something that you cook it and it lasts longer because you have a. But it's really difficult sometimes to get the mix down right, especially since when you have a meat that has a seasoning on it, it really takes up differently on some meats versus others, and it's very easy to go too salty or too sugary. Or my husband has Virginia ham, and it's way too much salt for me. But there are some things that I like. Bacon, man, if you make that right, it is just the most delicious thing on the planet. But it really comes down to which preservatives you use, which spices and seasons you use, how much you use of them, and how they react to that meat once you kind of shrink the water out, right?
Yep, for sure.
Right.
I think as we've been able to grow and make our products better, one was consistency, because I used to, not when my dad did it, it was kind of like a dash of this, dash of that, and so you struggle.
It's on his brain,
yeah,
right?
So you struggle with a little bit of the consistency product, but as we've done that, and we've actually started kind of going back to some of the old world, kind of like you're talking methods, where we don't want we don't want as much preservative, we don't want the binders in the product to adhere it. We're going back to looking at how you manipulate the meat to extract protein to help it bind together on its own, using its own products. And you're seeing if you're sourcing better beef, and you're getting some of these natural things that it's occurring in the beef, and the meat and the fats that maybe you don't see on the commercial level. They kind of want to just take any meat, put it all into a recipe, and add all this other stuff to it to make a consistency. Where we're kind of looking at the process the whole way through. We don't. There was kind of the old method of like, we always kind of chuckle about it. It's our own method. We say garbage in, garbage out.
Isn't it the truth though?
One of our roast beefs that we have here, we won an award with that as well, and I just add a little bit of lemon juice to my brine, just to kind of give you that little bit of a citrus flavor on your tongue when you're eating it. And so little things like that can be good, but again, you have to start with a good product and know which correct mussels and stuff like that to use.
So is that how you got to the Devon side of things, or did the Devon kind of bring you there, or how did those two things meet? Because that just seems like you look at that and go, "Ooh, that's jerky. That's right."
Yeah. My journey on the cattle was quite a bit different. I won't say different, but when I started raising cattle, it was because we had some other farmers in our area that were raising cattle for us, and so we had like a certain guy, and he did a good job, and he was doing all grain finished, and then he gave it up, so we went to a guy that had like similar program, and he did a good job, and then they had like Marcellus gas come in, and a lot of farmers got good money, and then they retired away and quit doing it. So I started with that program. It was a feedlot system with a Holstein cattle, and you could grow them fast and you could grow them big, and and so you could make money. But I was to the point where I had one of my favorite sayings that one farmer said was, "Cows have 4 legs and I have 2." And he said, "I want them to work harder than I do."
Lazy farmer,
right? And so, and it was a product that I had no control over anything I was doing. I was buying calves, I was buying feed, and so the prices were always getting set for me by the industry and by the local auctions and stuff. So I wanted to start into a grass-fed operation where I was grazing, I was healing the land, I was utilizing all of our land, because at that time when I was doing feedlot, I was only utilizing maybe 5% of our farm, and then we were just making hay off the rest of it. Well, I completely shifted that, so I knew what kind of system I wanted to get to with grazing. Then it was identifying which cattle was going to be the best for my system, and so I shopped that around for quite a while. And like I said, I like to go to universities and follow university studies, but some of
engineer at your core, right?
Exactly. But I was finding that they had a certain type that they were pushing, and it wasn't grass-fed cow. They weren't really examining that, at least in Pennsylvania. It was, and so going to grazing conferences and stuff. Then I started looking at the different types of cattle, because the people would have their booth setups, and that's where I first found the Red Devons. We had a booth set up there, and then from there I I went online and I found farmers that were raising Devons, and then Dad and I went and were testing steaks because my dad, Gail, has been in the meat industry since the 70s, and he said you won't raise good grass-fed beef. You can't fatten it; it won't be good. It won't have the marbling. You have to feed them grain if you're going to get there. And so we tested and went to 3 different Devon farms, got a sirloin steak and examined it, and while it didn't look like it had much marbling or fat, it was still tender. It was super tender and flavorful.
It doesn't have those little layers of fat, which you always associate with taste and tenderness.
Yeah.
So Jeremy Eng set us up with that. The restaurant that we went to, and we had the chef. Oh, he was just a beautiful man. He cooked the steaks. They were fillets, and in any steak, you're expecting a little bit of marbling because otherwise you're thinking, okay, this is not really tender. I mean, it'll be good, but it was the most tender thing ever, and yet it's such a different profile, that component with the lack of marbling in it. That's amazing.
And we went to the first farm and got it, brought it back and tried it, and then we got a burger and a sirloin. And the first thing we tried was a sirloin on the grill, and Dad's like, that's actually really tender. I wasn't expecting that. And then we tried the hamburger, and it was just funny to see his face when he cooked up for the first time, because he's like, I haven't tasted flavor like that in a hamburger since I was a kid on our farm when we were, grinding our whole beef. And he's like, there was something different about that we've lost over the last 20, 30 years in our beef.
Amazing? But it's interesting to me, you say your dad immediately recognized this is the beef that I had when I was a kid.
Yeah, you recognize it for sure. And then so we went to another processor, or another Devon producer up in New York. His name's Paul Spaws, and we tried some of his, and it was the same thing. We kind of looked like, this is lean, and so it was consistent. And then after that, I was like, okay, now I'm gonna get into it. I'm gonna start raising some cattle. So I started with some commercial animals. And I was trying to buy on the cheap because I was getting started. Had some issues that I couldn't really identify if it was animals or if it was my management.
Mm-hmm. There's a learning curve.
Yeah, and so then that's whenever Jeremy Eng come up and consulted with me, and Bob Van Kirk from Four Seasons was there, and he had brought some of his Devons to put on display, because Jeremy kind of wanted to show people, like, here's what some really nice cattle can look like. So he asked Bob if he would bring them because he was close. And I just remember looking at Bob's cattle and looking at my cattle, and his were just so much better fleshed. And I mean, they were 200 pounds heavier than mine, and I kind of scratched my head like, I know I have some commercial Devons here that have some influence. Talked some more with Jeremy, and then ended up switching, and I went to 100% pure Red Devons. Okay, so we're here with this is one of my grass-fed Devon steers. Carcass is weighing at 779 pounds. We're gonna break this animal. This animal was broken between the 6th and 7th rib, and then it would have been broke here between the 12th and 13th rib. That would have been part of the hind quarter. So when we talked earlier about bacon and what part of the bacon I use, we'll show you more in there on the saw whenever I cut it. But I typically like to use the bacon portion from here to here. I'm gonna have that muscle is gonna carry in. I'm gonna have a meatier piece of bacon, where a lot of guys will come across here and give this part to me, which it doesn't have near the muscling as you're gonna have towards underneath. This brisket muscle is gonna carry back into that bacon, and that's what I'm trying to capitalize on for making my best bacon. But then from here, it's going to be, we're going to have Chuck's English, and we're going to do arm, and then there's going to be the brisket. So this animal's been hanging for 4 weeks the way this customer wanted to. We can have nice, good and tender steaks. We're going to have a little bit of trimming you'll see throughout the video as we go, to get this thing cleaned up and ready for him. Okay, the first cut I'm going to make is get this brisket and that arm off of there. I want to get that off there first, so that way I got a smaller portion that I got to move around with, and now we're going to trim this up and get it ready to make the rest of the roast cuts. So he's going to want the tomahawk. We're going to do tomahawk steaks out of this beef. So yeah, right here's where I like the beef bacon on this side. Like I say, the brisket muscle kind of carries back into here. And a lot of people will try to give you this part of the rib as the bacon, but we prefer this muscle, this side. It's got more muscling in it.
You have to be pretty strong to do this.
Yeah. So this would be the other side of where, this is the chuck side of where the ribeye would be. So between the 6th and 7th and 12th ribeyes over here. So what we'll call this is our chuck Delmonico. So this chuck is going to carry down in here. You'll get a couple steaks off of it before you really get into the chuck, and before that muscle really starts to take on a different look. And we're going to cut out the flat iron here out of the shoulder blade.
USDA stamp there. Fall 75.
So right here's where we cut for our arm roast. We're going to cut it from about here to here is where we're going to get those arms across that way. And then where we took this English out of, this would be our English roast would kind of come from this region of it. And since we've removed the flat iron, now we won't cut English roast for this one.
Right angle on it.
Maybe I'll give him an arm roast. Let him try it.
What are you doing there?
I'm going to do cross-cut shanks for this guy, so he can make some soups and have some nice meat to go with it.